Welcome back to Solomon's Porch with your host, Jason.
And Sean.
And we're back with another episode here for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, if you're listening via podcast, check out our YouTube page. Go subscribe to that. If you're watching via YouTube, go subscribe to the podcast. And you'll hear all the wonderful music that we play during the breaks. This past one being by Darren Miller, which is Take Flight featuring ASAP Preach. So, yeah, man, we're going to be talking about this third in our series of cultural trends killing the church. This week, we're talking about lack of volunteerism. Lack of volunteerism. So, one of the things that, Sean and I have talked about home churches before, and I think one of the big thing about mega churches, I'm not against mega churches. I think they can have its place and effectiveness in certain scenarios for certain people. But I think one of the big problems with the mega church is you have so many people there, and kind of like we talked about last episode with the expectations for like greatness or for the demand for excellence. I think when you have so many people that are on staff at a church, you expect the staff to do everything, so therefore you feel like you shouldn't have to volunteer to do anything. And I think this hurts the church as well as the people in the church. So, Sean, have you had any experience with lack of volunteerism?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
I've never had a problem with it whatsoever.
Not you liking to volunteer. Seeing the devastation of the lack of volunteers.
I think if you've ever served in any kind of ministerial role whatsoever, ministry role, you have experienced lacking volunteers. The number of groups that I've been a part of that end up trying to or associated with even that try to generate folks' interest in volunteering and being involved is epic. I can't say that there's one that stands out to me at all that they didn't. And we're talking various sizes of groups too. So, a lot of times you think, oh, well, yeah, smaller groups, they're having a hard time getting volunteers to do stuff. But it's just as difficult with large groups because actually the number of volunteers goes up, or the need for volunteers goes up more with larger groups. And so technically the percentage still remains the same. There's always been this sort of like old saying of, it's like 90% of what's done in the church is done by like 30% of the people. And so, if you're truly blessed, you have 30% of your population that's actually involved in doing anything. And that's pretty sad.
Yeah.
So, the one thing that we know is that it's always easier to be able to deal with any kind of situation, whether it's a challenging sort of situation, putting out a fire, or even if it's doing something that's going to be, progressively helping in some other way, serving. It's always easier to do with more hands. The more people that are involved, the easier it is to make things go. It makes sense. But the church has always struggled with that. So part of the reason ultimately what ends up happening is that we end up saying, so why is that? What is it that's contributing to people's lack of volunteering? And some of that, and that this is based off of the article that we've been utilizing to come up with these topics, has been the lack of education or professional experience by volunteers. So they don't feel qualified is what it boils down to. Or maybe even in some cases, we don't allow them to because they're not qualified to. I've been a part of groups, organizations that, again, have also said, hey, we understand that maybe you don't feel like you're qualified. That's okay because you can learn. I remember the first time I taught Sunday school, they were like, hey, it's okay if you don't know. You can ask questions. You'll be teamed up with somebody else that has more experience, and you'll get every other Sunday to be able to help teach, and they'll be there in the class as well to help facilitate if you need help along the way. And that was a great learning experience, and it got me comfortable with saying, okay, maybe I can start to do things outside of my comfort zone, and I can serve in ways that I never thought that I was ever qualified to do so. Most people feel like, oh, in order for me to be able to teach a Sunday school class, I've got to have a doctorate. And there's like nobody that has a doctorate that's teaching Sunday school class.
Yeah.
That's just your preacher. No. Whether you feel that way or whether it's imposed upon you, that is, probably one of the number one things that prevents volunteers for any organization.
Yeah, I think the biggest trend here lately is that expectation on staff to do everything these days, and people just want to show up, they pay their tithe, and they want to be entertained, fed, whatever. And I get, like, some people have very difficult home life situations going on. Like, maybe you just can't serve in this season. Like, that's totally fine. But some people, it's just, if there's not enough, if that excellence isn't coming across, as we discussed before, they dip out and go find another church somewhere.
Right.
And I think the problem is one, we're expecting way too much for these people who are being paid, and we don't really want to pay them. Like, if you...
Absolutely. Well, we talked about expectations in a prior episode, so you guys can always go back and listen to that episode as well. Please do so, because obviously it's very much connected. But some of that goes to what we've historically always done. And unfortunately, whether it's the church or really a lot of other businesses even in general, is that we get stuck in this mindset. This is the way that we do things. So this is what we always do. The pastor really just comes and preaches, and he should have his own secular job, kind of an idea. And maybe we compensate him a little bit for his gas money or whatever. So breaking outside of that is difficult for folks.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, the reason why they don't volunteer is because, maybe they're too busy. Like, whenever we talked about, why don't we have as many mentors? Why don't we have more mentors in the church these days? Mm-hmm. Why is that? It's because people are so busy all the time. They book up all of their available time with something. And so, the church gets the back burner. The church, being the body, gets the back burner. People are in the hospital. Like, oh, well, isn't pastor supposed to go visit them? Isn't pastor supposed to send roses? The church send roses and this, that, and the other. People have, they need help with doing something because they've had surgery. So isn't there someone that's paid? Like, can we get the maintenance guy to go and cut their grass, or things like that,
right,
for churches who have maintenance men and all those other positions as a paid staff position. But we look at, isn't it their responsibility, and it's created a sense of lazy Christians. And we kind of talked about this with the whole home church thing. Is the thing about the home church movement is everybody has to be involved,
right?
Like, for the body to function, like, you don't have, ideally you wouldn't have one person doing everything, or even two people. Everybody would pitch in a little bit to do different things as a part of the body.
Yeah.
And when you have a humongous church, you're paying for, 5, 10, 15, 20 people to do everything, and you just show up and enjoy and leave. So I think that's kind of the mega church is one of the reasons why volunteers have been down at, especially smaller churches, which needs, I don't want to say they need the most volunteers necessarily. Every church equally needs volunteers, but I think that's an area that gets hurt probably the most is the smaller churches. Because they really don't have the ability to do things for the kids or high schoolers or even the adults. They can't really do outings where you just get to know each other and hang out,
Right, and so because of that mindset shift in society, so even younger folks that are coming up in those churches start to leave those churches and go to the big churches, so that way they can be served rather than serving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then attendance starts to drop off in those smaller churches, and they have a hard time surviving, because then it's usually just the older folks that are left behind, and they can't quote unquote compete with what everybody else is able to provide to be able to match up with what the expectations are by today's society.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of my kids not wanting to volunteer to clean their room or wash dishes.
Oh,
They expect mommy and
isn't
daddy
that just
to do
being
it for
responsible? Oh, being responsible. Did he just say that? You should be
them.
responsible.
You said be responsible.
I did.
I said they want mommy and daddy to do it.
Well,
I don't know which one's more insulting.
but I think the point is that, you know, if you're part of a body of believers, you should have responsibility.
Yeah.
You should have ownership. You should have a sense of, you know what, I see that somebody's dropped a tissue here on the floor. I'm not going to wait for the cleaning person to come by and pick it up. Yeah. I can pick this up and throw it away. Maybe I grab another tissue to be able to pick up that tissue because you just don't know what's in it. But the point is that when you see something that needs to be done, you go ahead and take care of it because there's a sense of ownership. There's a sense of responsibility there. You want to take care of these things because you care about it, because it has value to you. And I think that's what we're seeing in terms of the some of that shifting in the increase in home churches is that people really actually like that.
Yeah.
You know, so whether it's, you know, hey, I've got to clean my house to make sure it's nice and tidy so that way I can have 15, 20 people over here for worship. Okay, great. Or, you know, whatever the case may be, that we have refreshments. So somebody says, you know, hey, I really like that we have coffee and donuts for our home church. And so I really want to make sure that it's not Folgers coffee, but I actually want something really good and quality like Lenoka coffee. Shameless plug. Doesn't benefit me, but and a little jab at
You
Jason.
don't want coffee snobs at your home group. Folgers again.
Yeah, a little jab on Jason because he drinks his Folgers. He likes it, and that's okay. So, but just the point is that you know, you're more willing to take stake and have that piece of ownership that you're willing to invest in, and you might even feel more like you're needed. You have the value. Yeah, so, you know, how often do people show up to a larger church and feel like, oh, well, somebody else has already got this. Yeah. Somebody else is already providing coffee. Well, maybe that one person that's providing coffee and donuts is also taking care of the parking lot, is also taking care of the grounds maintenance, is also taking care of, you know, the AV as well. And you know what? It'd be really nice if somebody could take the donuts and coffee.
Yeah, yeah.
But at least in the home church, you see that there's the need. And you can see that, oh, out of the 10, 15, 20 of us, I can do this. That's all right. And it's also usually feasible, too. Most people can allot a budget for that sort of thing, you know. And it's not a huge commitment either.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's another one of those volunteer issues is the fear of commitment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, you know, I've always heard, and I'm not even sure exactly where I first heard it from, where it originated, or if anybody knows, but be the change you want to see. Like, if you see something that needs to be done, you see something needs to be changed, like, be that change agent, or ask how you can be that change agent. How can you be a part of that? Figure out who's in charge of this area, the ministry or the church or the home group. And I say, hey, you know, I think this is a good thing that should be done, could be done. Can I be a part of that? Instead of complaining that those who get paid aren't doing it. Because I can tell you, in every job, people are overworked.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In the church, paid positions are even more overworked. Because I guarantee you, those paid positions still have a regular job. I guarantee you the majority, probably 90 to 95% of paid church staff still have to have a second job to pay regular bills.
Right.
And
or at least have a spouse that has a significant enough extra income.
Yeah, true that.
Yeah. They may have a little side biz going on or something, but usually the other spouse is making enough bank.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Being that change is the sort of thing where, so, you know, when I show up to church and I go, wow, not only is this coffee like not brewed very well, but it's also Folgers. Be that change. Go ahead and say, hey, who do I need to talk to about coffee and stuff? I'd be interested in donating some coffee if that would be something that.
I'm fine with it, Sean. You can donate.
Yeah,
coffee.
Go ahead.
Is this in-house discussion or theoretical or rhetorical?
No, it was an idea that stemmed from the church that we're currently attending services at right now.
Okay.
The Sunday morning worship services, and so because technically we have Friday night worship services too. So the Sunday morning worship services, and and so it came to mind, and it's like, okay, but can I really afford to do that? Well, maybe I can't, but maybe I could, and this is not to say that that's the sort of thing you should do instead of your tithing. This should be your giving. So this needs to be above and beyond your tithing, by the way. So just to kind of clarify those sorts of things, because a lot of times people think, well, I paid my tithes, so I'm good, right? I paid my weekly dues, I paid my monthly dues, right. So then I should be served from here. You should provide me excellent coffee because I paid my weekly dues, and that's just not how that works. So
that almost becomes country club-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Is how it turns out to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think one of the key points, and we'll kind of, I guess, round it out here, is you said something about ownership. You got to take ownership. You got to take that responsibility to be able to say, okay, I'm also responsible for the things that happens here. If you have a security team, doesn't mean you leave. You wouldn't just assume the security team is going to completely guard your kid at every point in time. You're still going to have some responsibility over your child walking down the hallway.
Sure.
You're going to make sure they don't hit the wall or fall or run and be unsafe. In the same way, I would think that the rest of the part of the church, whether it be building or people or whatever that entails, that you have some form of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if there's something on the floor, if there's a wet spot, tell someone there's a wet spot so it can be covered up, cleaned up, put a wet floor sign out, something like that.
Right.
If there's ants on the counter, go tell somebody. Take ownership. If someone is hurting, take ownership and go over there and comfort them.
What's funny is so this is the second time that you've kind of mentioned something about serving others, and more specifically when they're like hospital or in some kind of emotional need or distress. And I've been in the sort of flip side of that where the pastoral leadership was far more hands off, to the point of almost unwilling to do any of those kinds of visitations or helping in those ways, but relied on the congregation to do that or their leadership to do that, to fill that in for something that they just did never feel comfortable doing in the first place. And maybe that's your scenario, and that's certainly, I would always encourage that your leadership or your pastoral staff should try to step up a little bit. But at the same time, you may recognize that's an area of struggle for them. So feel free to step up to that. You don't have to be pastor to go pray for somebody in that's getting ready to go into surgery. You can do that. God doesn't hear the pastor any more clearly than he does your own prayers. So having somebody else's support there means a lot, no matter what's going on. So.
Yeah, every Christian has a spiritual gift, at least one spiritual gift.
Yeah.
And if you're not exercising that, then you're not being useful to the body.
Well, and again, it's disrespectful to God.
It is.
He gave you a gift, and you're just letting it sit there.
Right. And so, just because someone at the church is officially paid to do that doesn't mean that you shouldn't volunteer to do it.
Right.
You might be better at talking to people, making them feel better in the hospital than somebody else is. I know one pastor, every single time I see him, I can't help but to smile.
Mm.
He's just that type of person.
Right.
He goes and sees people in hospital. He does counseling. He's just really great with people. Other pastors might be really good at teaching and not as good with people. So, the one...
And that's why they have associate pastors.
Yeah. or a volunteer who's willing to go out and see people in hospitals and stuff.
Right.
But either way, though, I would challenge you this week, if you're not actively involved in your church, then think about a way that you can plug in and do something, be of use to the body. Dead limb is cut off. I mean, the vine that produces no fruit is cut off and thrown into the fire. I'm not saying if you don't volunteer, God's going to send you to hell. What I'm saying is, it's a huge implication that you should be useful to the body.
Sure.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it for the discussion. I hope that wasn't too toes stomping, but if it was, then maybe, I don't know, maybe we did something good. So we do want to thank our supporters of the show, Patreon supporters, Sam Blackwell, Jason Motley, Purely, Bachelorette, and TrueStrengthApparel.com. Again, sponsor for this podcast, Chris Nunn with his song Hear Me Now, which we played at the top of the first break of the show. So go check him out, support him, and we'll be back next time. We're going to be ending off with
If I Were You by Switchfoot. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can check out that track. Otherwise, feel free to check it out on whatever your preferred music avenue is. And they are on tour right now with Collective Soul, so you can probably catch them coming to coming to a town near you.
All right, we'll be back. We'll be back next time. See you soon, and always remember, Jesus loves you way more than we ever could.
Amen.